When AOC saw the homeless girl collapse outside the Capitol building, she had no idea that saving her life would expose the biggest political scandal of the year and change both their lives forever. The morning mist clung to the marble steps of the United States Capitol like a shroud, creating an ethereal atmosphere that seemed to soften the imposing grandeur of American democracy's most sacred building. The early October air carried a crisp bite that hinted at the coming winter, and the first rays of sunlight painted the dome in shades of gold and amber that would have been breathtaking if anyone had time to notice. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez emerged from her black sedan at precisely 7:15 a.m., her burgundy coat buttoned against the morning chill, a leather portfolio tucked securely under her arm. She had arrived early for what promised to be one of the most important committee hearings of her career, a closed-door session on government ethics that could reshape how Washington operated. The Capitol steps, usually bustling with tourists and staffers even at this early hour, were surprisingly quiet. A few security guards stood at their posts, their breath visible in the cool air, while maintenance crews worked silently to prepare the building for another day of democracy in action. AOC moved with purpose, her heels clicking rhythmically against the stone steps as she mentally reviewed her prepared questions for the hearing. She had spent weeks preparing for this moment, gathering evidence and testimonies that could expose a network of corruption that reached into the highest levels of government. But as she approached the building's east entrance, something caught her peripheral vision, a small figure huddled against the cold marble columns, partially hidden behind an ornamental pillar. At first glance, it appeared to be just another piece of debris that the maintenance crews had missed, but as AOC drew closer, the shape resolved into something that made her heart skip a beat. A young girl, perhaps 16 or 17, wearing clothes that had seen far better days and sitting in a position that suggested she was trying to make herself as invisible as possible. The girl's dark hair was matted and unkempt, her thin frame barely filling out a jacket that was several sizes too large. Her face was pale, almost translucent in the morning light, and her eyes were closed as if she was sleeping or worse. AOC's political instincts told her to keep walking, to let security handle whatever this was. She had a hearing to attend, questions to ask, a political scandal to uncover, but something deeper, more human, made her pause. The girl wasn't moving, not even the slight rise and fall of breathing that should have been visible in the cold air. AOC found herself changing direction, her prepared questions temporarily forgotten as she approached the motionless figure. As she got closer, she could see that the girl's lips had a bluish tint, and her skin had the waxy pallor that suggested serious medical distress. "Hey," AOC said softly, kneeling down beside the girl despite the fact that her expensive coat would probably be ruined by the cold stone. "Hey, can you hear me?" No response. The girl's breathing was so shallow it was barely perceptible. AOC reached out and gently touched the girl's shoulder, alarmed by how cold and clammy her skin felt even through the worn fabric of her jacket. The girl's eyes fluttered open for a moment, revealing pupils that were unfocused and confused before rolling back slightly. "Oh God," AOC whispered, her political composure instantly replaced by genuine concern. She pulled out her phone and dialed 911, her fingers trembling slightly as she spoke to the operator. "I need an ambulance at the Capitol building, east entrance. There's a young girl here who appears to be in medical distress. She's unconscious and barely breathing." As she waited for the emergency responders, AOC took off her own coat and carefully draped it over the girl, trying to provide some warmth and comfort. The girl's eyes opened again, this time focusing on AOC's face with a clarity that was startling. But what AOC didn't know was that this chance encounter was about to unravel the very scandal she had spent weeks investigating, and the girl's next words would change everything she thought she knew about Washington's power structure. "You're Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez," the girl whispered, her voice barely audible but carrying an urgent intensity that made AOC lean in closer. "Yes, I am," AOC replied, surprised that this homeless teenager would recognize her. "What's your name? How long have you been out here?" The girl's eyes darted around nervously, as if checking to make sure they weren't being overheard. Her breathing was still labored, but there was a desperate alertness in her expression that suggested whatever was wrong with her went beyond just exposure to the cold. "My name is... I've been living in the tunnels under the building. For weeks. I've seen things, heard things." AOC's blood ran cold. The maintenance tunnels beneath the Capitol were supposed to be completely secure, monitored around the clock. If this girl had been living down there undetected, it represented a massive security breach that could have implications far beyond a single homeless teenager. What kind of things? AOC asked gently, her mind racing between concern for the girl's immediate medical needs and the potential political implications of what she was hearing. Luna's hand suddenly gripped AOC's wrist with surprising strength, her eyes wide with a fear that seemed to go beyond her current medical crisis. "The hearing you're going to," she whispered, her voice gaining urgency despite her obvious weakness. "They know you're coming. They know what questions you're going to ask. Someone's been feeding them information." The words hit AOC like a physical blow. Her hearing was supposed to be classified, her questions carefully guarded secrets that only a handful of people knew about. If Luna was telling the truth, it meant there was a leak in AOC's own office, or worse, that her communications were being monitored. But before AOC could ask any follow-up questions, the sound of sirens filled the air as emergency vehicles approached the Capitol steps. What the girl whispered next would completely change the trajectory of AOC's investigation and reveal a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of American government. As the paramedics rushed up the steps with their equipment, Luna grabbed AOC's hand with desperate strength, pulling her close enough that only she could hear the words that would shatter everything AOC thought she knew about Washington. "The Ethics Committee," Luna whispered, her voice barely audible over the sound of approaching medical personnel. "3 of the members, they're being blackmailed. Photos, recordings, someone's controlling their votes." AOC's heart raced as the implications hit her. If Luna was telling the truth, it meant that the very committee she was about to testify before was compromised, that the investigation she had spent months preparing could be derailed before it even began. "Who?" AOC whispered urgently as the paramedics began setting up their equipment. "Who's doing this?" But Luna's eyes were already rolling back, her grip on AOC's hand loosening as her medical crisis deepened. The paramedics gently but firmly moved AOC aside as they began their emergency treatment, checking vital signs and preparing to transport the girl to the hospital. "Ma'am, we need some space," one of the paramedics said professionally, but AOC barely heard him. Her mind was spinning with the implications of Luna's revelation. A Capitol police officer appeared at her elbow, his expression concerned but businesslike. "Representative Ocasio-Cortez, we're going to need to ask you some questions about how you found this individual." AOC nodded absently, watching as the paramedics carefully lifted Luna onto a stretcher. As they prepared to carry her to the ambulance, Luna's eyes opened one more time, meeting AOC's with an intensity that was unmistakable despite her weakened condition. "Room B15, she mouthed silently, so quietly that only AOC could understand. "Tonight, midnight, come alone." The message sent a chill down AOC's spine. Room B15 was in the basement level of the Capitol, an area that was supposed to be completely secure and off-limits to unauthorized personnel. If Luna had access to that area, it confirmed her claims about living in the building's hidden spaces. As the ambulance pulled away with its lights flashing, AOC stood on the Capitol steps, her mind reeling with questions and implications. Her carefully planned hearing suddenly seemed less important than the mystery of how a homeless teenager had gained access to classified information about congressional operations. The Capitol police officer cleared his throat, bringing AOC's attention back to the immediate situation. "Representative, can you tell us exactly what happened here?" AOC looked at the officer, weighing her words carefully. Everything about this situation felt wrong, from Luna's presence in a secure area to her knowledge of classified congressional activities. But something in the girl's eyes had convinced AOC that she was telling the truth, that the conspiracy she had been investigating was far deeper and more dangerous than she had imagined. "I found her collapsed on the steps," AOC said carefully, providing the basic facts without mentioning Luna's revelations about the compromised committee. "She appeared to be suffering from exposure and possibly malnutrition. I called for medical assistance immediately." The officer made notes on his report, his expression suggesting this was a routine incident that would be quickly filed and forgotten. But AOC knew that nothing about this morning had been routine. As she finally entered the Capitol building for her hearing, AOC's mind was split between the official business at hand and the mysterious girl who claimed to know secrets that could reshape her understanding of how Washington really worked. The hearing proceeded exactly as Luna had predicted. The committee members asked softball questions, carefully avoiding the areas that AOC had planned to explore. Their questions felt rehearsed, their responses to her answers predictably evasive. It was as if they knew exactly what she was going to say before she said it. By lunchtime, AOC was convinced that Luna had been telling the truth. Someone was indeed feeding information to the committee members, and her investigation was being systematically undermined from within. But what happened in the next 24 hours would prove that Luna's knowledge went far beyond a simple information leak, and the evidence she possessed would expose a scandal that reached into the very heart of American democracy. That evening, as AOC sat in her office reviewing the day's events, she found herself staring at the clock, watching the minutes tick toward midnight. Every rational part of her mind told her that meeting Luna in an unauthorized area of the Capitol was dangerous, potentially career-ending if she was caught. But the girl's words echoed in her memory. Photos, recordings, someone's controlling their votes. If there was evidence of blackmail and corruption at the highest levels of government, AOC knew she had a duty to investigate, regardless of the personal risk. At 11:45 p.m., AOC made her decision. She gathered her courage, turned off the lights in her office, and began making her way through the quiet corridors of the Capitol toward the basement level and room B15. The building felt different at night, its usually bustling energy replaced by an almost cathedral-like silence. Security guards patrolled predictable routes, and AOC used her knowledge of the building's layout to avoid the main corridors, taking service stairs and maintenance hallways that she hoped would keep her movement undetected. As she approached the basement level, AOC's heart was pounding. She had no idea what she would find in room B15, or if Luna would even be there. For all she knew, this could be a trap, a setup designed to compromise her investigation. But when she quietly opened the door to room B15, what she found inside would exceed her wildest expectations and provide the evidence needed to bring down one of the largest corruption scandals in congressional history. The room was small and dimly lit, filled with outdated computer equipment and filing cabinets that looked like they hadn't been touched in years. But in the center of the space, Luna sat cross-legged on the floor, looking remarkably better than she had that morning, surrounded by boxes of documents and a laptop computer that was displaying what appeared to be surveillance footage. "You came," Luna said, her voice stronger now but still carrying an undercurrent of wariness. "I wasn't sure you would." AOC stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "How are you feeling? Shouldn't you be in the hospital?" Luna smiled grimly. "I discharged myself. I've been taking care of myself for a long time. The collapse this morning, it wasn't just from hunger and cold. I've been living on almost no sleep for weeks, trying to document everything I've discovered." She gestured to the boxes around her. "This is just a fraction of what's hidden in this building. Financial records, communication logs, surveillance footage, evidence of a conspiracy that involves dozens of members of Congress from both parties." AOC moved closer, her eyes widening as she began to see the scope of what Luna had uncovered. Bank records showing suspicious payments, transcripts of phone conversations discussing vote trading, photographs that were clearly being used for blackmail purposes. "How did you get all of this?" AOC asked, her voice filled with amazement and concern. Luna's expression darkened. "My father worked for the Congressional IT department for 15 years. He discovered the surveillance network that's been recording private conversations and monitoring personal communications of elected officials. When he tried to report it, he was found dead in his apartment, ruled a suicide." The revelation sent a chill through AOC. "Luna, I'm so sorry, but why didn't you go to the FBI, or the media, or because they're all compromised?" Luna interrupted, her voice filled with bitter experience. "The same people who killed my father have people everywhere. The only reason I'm still alive is because I've been invisible, living in the spaces they don't monitor, gathering evidence they don't know exists." She pointed to the laptop screen, which was showing footage of what appeared to be a secret meeting in a congressional office. "This was recorded 3 days ago. Watch." AOC leaned in to see the screen, and what she witnessed made her blood run cold. 3 members of the Ethics Committee, the same committee that had questioned her that morning, were meeting with a man she recognized as a lobbyist for one of the largest defense contractors in the country. The audio was clear. The lobbyist was discussing specific votes he needed, mentioning the exact amounts of money that would be transferred to offshore accounts, and showing photographs that were clearly being used to coerce compliance. This is massive," AOC whispered, the full scope of the corruption finally becoming clear. "If this gets out, it could bring down half of Congress," Luna finished. "That's why they killed my father. That's why they'll kill me if they find out what I know. And now that you've seen this, you're in danger too." The truth she revealed would ultimately expose a conspiracy involving 43 members of Congress, 17 lobbyists, and a surveillance network that had been operating in the Capitol building for over a decade, fundamentally changing how America viewed its elected officials. AOC stared at the evidence in front of her, realizing that her investigation into government ethics had led her to something far more serious than she had ever imagined. The homeless girl she had found collapsed on the Capitol steps was actually the daughter of a murdered whistleblower, carrying evidence that could reshape American politics. "What do you need from me?" AOC asked, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was facing. Luna looked up at her with eyes that seemed far older than her 17 years. "I need someone they trust, someone with a platform, someone who can get this evidence to the right people without getting killed." She handed AOC a crypted flash drive. "Everything is on here. Bank records, surveillance footage, communication logs, photographs. Enough evidence to prosecute dozens of people for bribery, blackmail, and conspiracy." AOC took the drive, feeling its weight both physically and symbolically. "Luna, this is incredibly dangerous. If what you're saying is true, there are people who will do anything to keep this secret." "I know," Luna replied quietly. "That's why I've been preparing for months. I have backup copies hidden in 7 different locations, along with a dead man switch that will automatically release everything if something happens to me." The sophistication of Luna's operation impressed AOC. This wasn't just a homeless teenager with a grudge. This was a carefully planned operation by someone who understood exactly how dangerous the information she possessed really was. "There's something else," Luna continued, pulling out a manila folder. "The surveillance network isn't just recording members of Congress. It's recording judges, cabinet members, even people in the White House. Whoever's running this operation has blackmail material on half the federal government." AOC felt overwhelmed by the implications. Who's behind it? Who's running the operation? Luna's expression grew grim. "That's the one thing I haven't been able to figure out completely. The money trails lead to shell companies and offshore accounts. But I have a list of the people who definitely know about it, including some you would never suspect." She handed AOC a single sheet of paper with a list of names that made her stomach drop. It included members of both political parties, senior staffers, and even some people she had considered allies. "Jesus," AOC whispered, scanning the list. "If this is accurate, it means that major policy decisions have been influenced by blackmail for years." "Decades," Luna corrected. "My father's records go back to the 1990s. This isn't a new operation, it's been growing and expanding for generations." The weight of the revelation settled over AOC like a heavy blanket. She was holding evidence of the largest political corruption scandal in American history, obtained by a homeless teenager whose father had died trying to expose the truth. "What's our next move?" AOC asked, surprised to find herself thinking in terms of partnership rather than simply turning the evidence over to authorities. Luna smiled for the first time since AOC had met her. "We're going to bring down the whole network, but we have to be smarter than they are, and we have to move fast. Once they realize you're involved, they'll try to discredit both of us." As dawn broke over the Capitol building, AOC and Luna sat in the hidden room, planning a strategy that would ultimately expose corruption at the highest levels of American government. The homeless girl who had collapsed on the Capitol steps had become AOC's most valuable ally in a fight that would define both of their futures. 3 weeks later, the story broke simultaneously in 6 major newspapers, backed by evidence so comprehensive that even the most skeptical observers couldn't dismiss it. The Capitol surveillance scandal led to 43 congressional resignations, 17 criminal indictments, and the largest congressional ethics investigation in American history. Luna, no longer homeless and no longer invisible, became the youngest person ever to testify before a joint congressional committee, her courage in exposing the truth earning her protection under federal whistleblower statutes and a full scholarship to any university in the country. AOC's career was transformed as well. Her role in bringing the scandal to light established her as one of the most trusted voices in American politics, someone willing to risk everything to expose corruption regardless of which party was involved. But perhaps the most important outcome was the relationship that developed between the Congresswoman and the teenager who had trusted her with the truth. Luna moved into a secure apartment, began attending high school for the first time in 2 years, and continued working with AOC on ethics reform legislation that would prevent future surveillance and blackmail operations. The morning that had started with a chance encounter on the Capitol steps had evolved into a partnership that changed American politics forever. AOC's decision to help a collapsed homeless girl had not only saved Luna's life but had exposed a conspiracy that reached into the highest levels of government. Years later, when asked about the most important moment of her political career, AOC would always point to that October morning when she chose to stop and help someone who needed it, never knowing that one act of human kindness would lead to the exposure of the largest political scandal of the decade. The lesson was clear. Sometimes the most important political acts have nothing to do with politics at all, but with simple human decency and the courage to do what's right, even when you don't know where it will lead. Luna's courage in preserving her father's legacy and AOC's willingness to risk her career for the truth had created a moment that reminded America that democracy works best when ordinary people choose to do extraordinary things, and that sometimes the most powerful political movements begin with a single act of compassion,